Yeah, good morning all. Today we will discuss about the different types of tables in Snowflake, and then we will move on to the discussion which we have left over yesterday, discussing about the micro partitions. Okay, so let me start with discussion about the different types of tables. We need to understand first. Let me list out the tables that are different types of tables present in the Snowflake. Okay, we have a temporary tables, and we have transient, we have permanent tables, then we have external tables, we have directory tables, we have iceberg tables, dynamic tables, and hybrid tables. Okay, these are all different types of tables that are present in Snowflake. Initially, Snowflake had started with the permanent tables. Initially, Snowflake had started with the permanent tables. Then it had introduced all the new type of tables like temporary, transient, external directory, iceberg, dynamic, and hybrid. These are all pretty new actually. From initially, you need to be very aware of these three tables: temporary, transient, and permanent. A little bit of knowledge comparatively external and directory tables. Iceberg tables, dynamic, and hybrid tables are very new to the Snowflake. They got introduced. If you see hybrid dynamic tables, these are around 1 month old, and hybrid tables these are still not available for all the cloud vendors. Like only available for AWS. The two only on a few selected reasons. Okay, you need to have an idea about the temporary, transient, permanent tables, and external tables and directory tables. Today we will cover these five types of tables, these three tables in a very deep manner. These types of tables are very important. You need to understand from in interview point of view. These three tables are very important. You need to understand them. Okay, so let us discuss what do you mean by temporary table. Temporary table is going to be a session specific. So whatever you store data, you can create the temporary table by using the temporary keyword. It is going to be a session specific. It means that if you can create the table and load the data into the table, you can work on the table. And if you close the session, if you log out from the Snowflake and log in, the table will not be present. Okay, it is very session specific. This table cannot be shared with others. Others cannot see this table. Similar to user stage, others cannot see user stage, right? Similar to that, temporary table cannot be seen by others. Okay, so first let us create the temporary table and validate whether this is a session specific or not. Okay, so here I am creating the first. Let me create the DB first. I'm creating one schema. So here I'm creating, this is the syntax to create the temporary table. Okay, create temporary is the keyword that we are going to use. Then everything is similar and same. Create temporary, we are going to give the table, and I'm going to create the text as a temporary table with this. I'm taking one column, serial number, and its data type is number. Okay, now let us create this temporary table. So I have created temporary table successfully, and I am trying to insert values into the temporary table. So my temporary table test got created. Now I am trying to fetch the records present in the table. I have these two records with the serial number 1 and 2. So the question here is, if the temporary table is created with the name test, can we create the same table again as a permanent table? So for the temporary, if you use the temporary, it is going to be a temporary table. If you don't use any keyword, then it is going to be a permanent table. Okay, so let us try to create the permanent table here. If you see here, the test had created successfully. So from this we can understand that we can create the tables with the same name. One table can be temporary, another table can be permanent. Okay, if you try to insert the data Here we have the two tables with the name test. One is a temporary table contains the same name test, and I mean to say permanent table contains with the same name test. And the definition is also same. I mean to say both the tables have a single column with the same data type. If I try to insert the data into the table test, can someone guess in which table does it get inserted? Okay, now I am trying to insert the data record into a table test. Now let's see whether it is going to insert the data into a temporary table or a permanent table. Just I am executing it. So one record got successfully inserted. So if I try to fetch the details from the test, let's see from in which table the record got inserted.
Permanent table.
No, actually the record will get, no, if you see here, the record got inserted in a temporary table. Why? Because temporary table will take the highest precedence. Temporary table, it will suppress all the if you create a temporary table, it will have the highest precedence in the session. Okay, let's see. This is the temporary table which we have created, right? This is the permanent table. Let me insert the data again. If you insert, it will be inserted, the record will be inserted in the temporary table. The temporary table will have the highest precedence. From this, the takeaway for us is we can create the temporary table and permanent table with the same name and same definition. When we try to insert the data will be inserted in the temporary table because the temporary table in any session will have the highest precedence. Whatever the actions that you perform on this temporary table with the same name, the actions will be performed on the only temporary table. Okay, and this temporary table is going to be a session specific. So currently we have logged into this session, right? So just I'm trying to execute this. I'm trying to fetch the records again. So in the current session we have the four records in the temporary table. Let me log out from the session and log in again, and let's validate whether the data is present in this particular table or not. I'm logging out from the current session. I'm logging in again. If you see here, the data is not present, but it says that object, it doesn't say that object is not present. We have the table text, but actually query produce no results because the whatever the temporary table that we have created in in the previous session got dropped. The temporary table does not contain any kind of, we cannot fetch back the data using the time travel. With the help of temporary tables, temporary tables don't have a fail safe as well as a time travel. If you let us assume that our current session is open for the 24 hours, beyond 24 hours if our session is open also, at the 24th hour the temporary table will get dropped. So the ideal scenario is we must not store any data which you require beyond 24 hours. We must use the other kind of table, either the transient tables or permanent table. Okay. Hope everyone is able to understand what do you mean by temporary table. Temporary table is going to be a session specific. Usually, in order to perform any kind of testing, if you require, if you want to try out different scenarios, then we will go for the temporary tables. This temporary tables data which we dropped cannot be retrieved again using the time travel and failsafe. Okay. Any doubts? Temporary table will take the highest precedence. Yeah. Someone is asking something. Please go ahead.
Like why should we need to create like temporary and permanent tables?
Yeah, permanent tables is usually permanent table stores the data. Temporary tables don't have any kind of time travel and failsafe. The requirement for creation is temporary table is if you want to test something, if you want to work out on any particular scenario, then we will use the temporary tables. So if you we have that time travel and failsafe requires the storage cost will be consumed if you are going to use the permanent tables. But whereas in case of temporary tables, whatever the table that you have created, it's going to have a span for only 24 hours. So the consumption of the storage cost will be very low. The data will not be preserved if you have the time travel period 90 days. So whatever, if you are going to create the temporary table, and let us assume that it is going to have a 90 days of time travel, so you are going to pay, even if you drop the current today, you need to pay for the storage cost for 90 days. Why? Because you are going to have the time travel period for 90 days. So if you the requirement is in order to perform any basic testing, to 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 try any new functions, then you will create the temporary tables. Okay, that is the main intention reason creating the temporary table. And this temporary table has the highest precedence in at any particular point of time during the session.
Like for testing purpose only, like we
Yeah,
creating these tables,
yes,
right?
only for the testing purpose, for the testing out any new functions, then we will create the new temporary table and we will test that particular scenario. And once we get result, that table will be, we will, I mean to say, the time period for the session will be only 24 hours. So we will move to the next, I mean to say, whatever the testing we have done, we will try out the different scenarios using the different tables. Okay.
Mohan, for example,
Hmm.
in order
Yeah.
to create a table, for example, create a replacer table, my table.
Okay.
So it will create one table, right? This which type of table? Whether it is
If
a
you are not
permanent
going
table
to
or
use,
transient table.
if you are not going to use any keyword like temporary or transient, then it is going to be a permanent table. Until unless you specify the snowflake create temporary table for me using the keyword temporary, then only it will create the type of table that we asked for. If you are not going to specify any kind of keyword, either like temporary or transient, then snowflake assumes that it is going to be a permanent table.
Okay.
Okay. So I guess everyone is able to clear. I guess everyone understood the difference. I mean to say, what do you mean by temporary table and its importance? So what, how the temporary table, how the data acts in the temporary table. If you log out from the session, the data which are present in the temporary table will be dropped and cannot be retrieved back using the time travel or either using the failsafe. Okay, temporary table doesn't contain any kind of time travel and failsafe. That you need to be clear. From interview point of view, you need to be very clear about the temporary, permanent, and transient tables, this difference, and the cloning mechanism, how it works. Okay. So let's move to the another types of table, which is known as a transient table. Okay, why? What is the requirement? So for temporary tables, we in order to try out any new scenarios, in order to try out any new features, or like we will create the temporary tables. Then what is the requirement of creating the transient tables? Let us understand. So we have the, whenever you have the data in the stage, we fetch the data from the stage and we load the data as is into a stage tables. Okay, let us consider this is going to be a stage table. We have loaded the data into a stage. From the stage, we have loaded into a snowflake and consider as is the data which is present in the tables loaded into the temporary tables as is. Okay, so our destination is going to be a, these are going to be our destination table. This is going to be a destination or reporting tables. So from the data which is present in the stage, it is a, you have from during ETL, I have done the ETL and the data came to the S3 bucket. Assume that from the S3 bucket we have loaded the data into stage tables. Okay, as is. The data, it's a raw form. It's in a raw form. It is the data with whatever extracted, whatever sent by the ETL guys, it was in the raw form. Now we need to move this data need to be present in the destination tables or reporting tables which have a different structure. So the data from this structure as is to as what is it is required can undergo lot of transformations between these process. Okay, from stage tables to destination tables, we the entire modeling would be different. We need, it may undergo lot of transformations. Before that, the data will need to be stored in a different kinds of tables. So before Transient tables help us to store the data which need to be transient. Transient in the sense, in generic meaning, it's like let us assume in that transient means assume in the sense transportation in that way. So it helps to move the data from staged tables to based reporting tables if the whatever the data changes that it undergoes, transformations that it undertakes will be stored in the in middle, which is known as a transient tables. Okay, if let us consider at the stage we have the multiple levels of transformation. So we this kind of one kind of transformation we are going to done. This is going to be a one transient table one. Then again this is going to be another kind of transient tables. This is going to be a transient too. So transient tables help us to store the data during the processing. And if you are to have the data pipeline, right? Once you have the data in the staged tables, then we need to transform this data and move into the destination tables. So all the changes that we perform in the initial level of transformation will store in the transient table one. So after that, if you require any kind of transformation, then we will store in the transient table two. Once the data is ready and this is the data which we require to be showcased to the downstreams or reporting tables, then we will fine tune that and it will be stored in the reporting tables. Usually these tables are going to be a permanent tables. Okay, then what is the necessity of creating the transient tables means in order to these transient tables, so temporary tables are going to be a session specific, whereas in case of transient tables these are not going to be a session specific. These tables get dropped only when exclusively you use the command drop and you drop the transient tables. Till then these tables will not get dropped. That is the advantage. Okay, so these also doesn't have any time travel and fail-safe feature. Once you drop the table, it cannot the data cannot be retrieved back. Okay, that is the advantage of using the transient tables. So in the earlier scenario you have seen that is it possible we have the one temporary table with the name test. Okay, let me create it again. We have the one temporary table created with the test. Now if you try to create the same table with the permanent table, it got created. One second. Now the permanent table got created. Now the question is, already I think it got created twice. Let me drop this. So it will drop the now it will drop the temporary table. Not if I try to drop it will the precedence will be temporary table. Now the table will be present. So I am executing the drop command again. So it has successfully dropped. Now let me create the temporary table. Now I'm creating the permanent table. So with the same name, we have one temporary table and as well as a one permanent table. The question is, can we, with the same name, can we create the transient table or not? Any guesses here? With the same name, can we create we have one temporary table and one permanent table. Is it possible to create the transient table again with the same name?
Yes.
Yes. Can we create?
Yes, we can create.
Yeah, let us try it out whether we can create the same name with the transient table it or not. It says that object test already exists. So from this we can understand that we cannot create the same name with the table name. Either can have the temporary table and the permanent table, but not with the same name. With the permanent table and transient table cannot have a same name. That is the general thumb rule. Okay. So if you try to create the transient table with the same name as the temporary table, it will not be created when the permanent table is present. Okay, that is the request. Let us
Like
yeah.
like with the same like
Yes,
with the same name, we can create temporary table and permanent table, right?
yes, we can create the temporary and permanent table.
With the same name.
Yeah, with the same name we can create that. Okay, let me explain you the difference between the transient, temporary, and permanent, and we will move to the next area known as a cloning. How the cloning works in case of temporary, transient, or permanent tables. Okay, these are the three. From interviewer point of view, these three tables are going to be very important. So try to understand the difference in terms of Able to hear me, right? Hello? Able to hear me?